Solo Leveling's anime is finally here, and many of you have likely heard about this series over the years as being one of the best webtoons. And since it's gained that title, a lot of amazing works have come out since then that people would say are way better. But here we are at the start of a new series, so let's start a strong foundation by going over all of the basics, like how the world is constantly changing in the Solo Leveling world. In this universe, humanity is constantly under the threat of dungeons, which first appear in their reality as portals to another realm. The first time this occurred, you can assume that it took humans a while to figure out what exactly is going on, but eventually they learn that if these portals are left alone, they actually shatter into a gate that leads into the world of the dungeon, letting the monsters and bosses within leak out into the real world. This event, which the anime explains is called a dungeon break, is something you can definitely look forward to as things get insane in the series, but because of the constant threat of dungeons appearing, humanity has come together with the formation of the Hunters, who are talented fighters or skilled healers who all go into the dungeons to hunt down the monsters and save reality. However, on one of these missions in a certain dungeon, we see as our main character Jin Woo, who is the world's weakest hunter, meets the worst possible fate. One character that it's probably safe for you to get attached to no matter how much it didn't seem like it in episode 1 is our main character Jin Woo, and while I'm really not a fan of his design early on in the series, I think it's pretty cool to see him before he becomes an extreme badass, because that's exactly the kind of story that we're in for. In Solo Leveling, we're gonna watch the weakest bottom of the bottom E-class hunter going for the top as he clears dungeons to try and save his sick mom with his good intuition and wits. But as you might have seen in episode 1 and 2 of the anime, things go very wrong for Jin Woo, or it seems. Because despite everything that he goes through against the boss statues, he manages to wake up an entirely new set of powers based around a leveling system that will allow him to grow more and more powerful if he struggles enough and actually earns his power-ups. And in general, I know this community and know they love cool edgelord characters with powers related to shadows and all the other aspects of Jinwoo's abilities, so as a person who is still reading through the source material, it'll be fun to experience the anime with you all at the same time that I'm learning more about the lore and sharing that all with you as well. And look forward to seeing this weak boy with just a cheap dagger to his name becoming that guy. Before episode 1, there's actually someone responsible for everything that happens to Jin Woo in the entire series, and that's the man who gave our main character his powers. In the Hunter Association, one of the jobs is assessing which hunters go out to which teams, especially for E and D rank hunters who get more or less rented out to guilds and raid teams by the agency. It's here where we learn of a nameless nobody within the association who one day received a call from a raid party complaining that they were sent Jin Woo and that he was useless. Thinking it's some kind of error, he checks Jin Woo's files and sees that he practically dies in almost every one of his missions, but as he looks deeper, he realizes that Jin Woo goes into dungeons to put food on the table and provide shelter for him and his sister since neither of their parents are around anymore. After a talk of his boss where he at first wants to ask Jin Woo to quit, he realizes that instead he wants to support him, and this leads to him pairing Jin Woo with Jin Hee, the B rank healer, where eventually he'd get his powers in the same dungeon as her. And to think this series wouldn't have happened without this one guy's help. However, in the beginning, as much as Jin Woo wants to pretend like this isn't all that serious, when he gets the first actual quest after the dungeon is over, he quickly realizes that he can't just ignore this power system. First off, Jin Woo is pretty much a video game character now in his reality, with him getting daily quests and unlocking secret quests that all come with various rewards and can grant him enough power to become truly strong. The flip side of this is ignoring the quest though, and when you don't complete a quest because you ignored it or otherwise completely failed, Jin Woo is sent into a penalty realm, which places him alone in a dungeon against different enemies. Near the beginning of the series, we see this happen as he gets sent into a massive sandy wasteland as he's chased down by a poison fanged giant sand centipede. And penalties can actually be pretty punishing because as weak as he is for a first time penalty, he was still expected to survive against this thing for 4 entire hours, meaning one way or another, the quests are going to make you more powerful if you're able to survive either completing them or the punishment for not doing them. But it's not just quests. Jin Woo's powers come with a host of different menus and ways to be abused, because of course these sorts of people are naturally going to form groups of some kind, and this paired with the threats of the dungeons and gates led to the formation of guilds. The main purpose of a guild is to gather strong hunters so that the guild can make official requests to take care of assigned gates all over the country using one or more different strike squads. These guilds are typically led by an S rank hunter, and we'll get into the different ranks of hunters and how that's determined soon, but the way that guilds work is way more interesting than the why they work. You see, guilds aren't just composed of fighters, they actually have different groups that provide different functions. For instance, every guild has a group known as the Mining Brigade. These people mine mana crystals that are inside of the dungeons while the hunters are doing battle against the monsters to open up and secure new areas that can be mined. Mana crystals aren't worth quite as much as crystals dropped from monsters, but there can be so many of them in a single dungeon that it makes mining them pretty lucrative. Helping out the Mining Brigade, we also have the Porters, and these are the people who take everything to and from the dungeon. This whole operation has a very delicate balance, but it really makes you appreciate how we've explained what guilds are in Solo Leveling, but in Korea there are 5 great guilds that are known as the strongest the country has to offer. First off, we have the Knights Guild, which is actually the weakest out of the 5, and they're the only one that doesn't have an S rank level leader, but they do have the highest number of A ranks out of any guild. On the opposite end of that, we have the Hunters Guild, which actually has 2 S rank members, and these 2 are the Guild Master and Vice Master respectively, but having 2 means they have the most out of every guild on this list. The Fiend Guild, also known as the Reapers, is next up, and this guild actually used to be the #1 guild in all of Korea. However, that changed when their guild actually split into 2, which led to the creation of of our next guild, the White Tiger Guild. This is one of the guilds we'll probably see the most of in season 1 since their leader really wants to know everything there is about Sung Jin Woo's strength, but we'll talk about him soon. Lastly, we have the Fame Guild, and beyond the fact that their leader can grow really large and that they typically hire more mages and fighters, not much is actually known about this guild, but next up, let's go a little more in detail. One of the newest guilds that has pretty quickly risen to power is the White Tiger Guild, led by a man named Yunho, who's pretty famous in Korea for his powers, so much so that his guild is actually named after them, and the same goes for their guild emblem, which is a black tiger with a white aura, but we'll discuss him in more detail in another short. The White Tiger Guild appears early on in the story when they're one of the first ones to notice that something is up with Sung Jin Woo just because of how fast he's clearing gates, and despite the fact that their relationship starts off a little rocky, they quickly become his allies, recognizing the benefit that they receive from being connected to someone as capable as our main character. Every guild has their own quirks or differences, but White Tiger is focused on raising up a strong next generation of hunters, so to that end they take all of their new recruits and throw them straight into dungeons to give them experience on the battlefield. But trust me when I say you're going to want to remember the name of this guild and watch out for their movements, especially with the way the anime might change a few things around. However, let's talk about why they're called the White Tigers and what's going on with their leader. First off, the leader of the White Tiger Guild is named Baek Yoonho, a brawly orange-haired man with pointy sideburns, and this man is an S-rank hunter and shouldn't be underestimated at all. Baek is able to transform his body into a wolf-like beast and has complete control over his transformation, so he can decide to only partially transform, or he can slowly work his way up to his massive fully realized form that is so huge it takes up a large section of a forest. Early on in the story, he and his guild figures out just a little bit of Jinwoo's secret, and this causes Baek to constantly try to find where Jinwoo is so that he can understand his power and come to his own conclusion on just what makes Sung so strong. But hopefully, depending on how much they cover in season 1, we'll actually be able to see Baek Yoonho in combat and not just a little scrap, because this is one of the characters I'm really excited to see animated when he really gets going. So let's go from the White Tiger Guild to the Hunters Guild, since we actually saw both of the leaders in episode 3 of the anime. The Hunters Guild is led by a man named Choi Jong-in, who it's safe to say is an extremely reputable hunter known well across the nation for his calm nature and fiery abilities befitting his S-rank status. Alongside him, we have the Vice Master of the Guild, Miss Cha Haein, another S-rank hunter who we've seen doing front flips and loitering around the first few episodes of the series with no clear end goal in sight. Their guild symbol is a combined sword and shield, and because they're the #1 guild in Japan, which is a title that they only recently gained, this guild is typically sent out on some of the most dangerous missions, and they're extremely equipped to handle this because their fame also allows them to be the largest guild in Korea. This massive force of hunters allows them to split their company up into 2 squads, with the S-rankers working together in the A squad and the B squad being comprised of only A and B rank hunters. They're an extremely organized and capable guild, and like many of the others, they're going to be interested in recruiting Jin Woo, but do you think he should join them? But now it's time to go way more in detail on the leader of the guild, a tall and slender red-haired man who goes by the name of Choi Jong-in. Now, beyond being the leader of the #1 guild in Korea, Choi is known by the title of the Ultimate Hunter, and this is partially because he's the best wielder of fire-type magic in the entire world, which is a big deal when you know that fire magic is also some of the most common magic for someone to awaken in the series. When Jinwoo meets him for the first time, he thinks about a rumor that Choi can destroy an entire building using one of his normal spells, and in fact, it's because Choi's nickname of the Greatest Hunter that people started calling Jinwoo the world's weakest hunter, since it's always nice to know who the best and worst are. A good example of Choi's powers are during a particular raid later on in the series, where he's the first person sent to touch land on a dangerous island surrounded with monsters. From a helicopter, Mr. Choi uses his fire to snipe away any flyers and even clear the entire path to the dungeon himself, saying that before he used to hear snapping noises when he burned monsters, but now he hears fireworks. Expect to see more of the Ultimate Hunter later. However, now it's time to talk about the Vice Master of the Guild, a woman who goes by the name of Cha Haein. And this S-rank warrior isn't just anybody, because she's also known as the strongest woman in the world. Cha Hae is a beautiful woman of short blonde hair who upon first impression is clearly very acrobatic, as we pretty much meet her doing flips to solve crimes and look cool doing it. But whereas the anime has made her look a little extra stoic, in the manhwa, Cha Hae eventually develops into a warm and kind person who would do anything to save her friends or keep a promise with someone she loves. Some interesting things about her are the fact that she can sense a bad smell that only hunters have, and very few people in our entire story have the ability to pick up on this scent. This may seem like a small detail, but it's actually pretty important to her character and how she progresses through the story before ultimately finding her purpose. But another interesting thing to know is that despite being an S-rank hunter, her sword master is a C rank, but she's so skilled with her sword and her movements that she's earned another nickname, the Dancer. If you like her, beware, this one's taken. However, just what is a guild master and what does their job entail? Well, first off, to become a guild master, you need to learn all of the rules and regulations that come with being a hunter like the back of your hand. And once that's done, the first step to actually getting a guild started is to complete 20 dungeons of your own personal strike force. Now, this is easier said than done because as we've seen over the course of the series so far, even clearing lower ranked dungeons can be really difficult for most of your common hunters, and for a new guild, common hunters is pretty much all you're going to get, as the more reputable hunters have already signed with other guilds. Now, there's actually a great incentive for someone in this universe to lead a guild instead of joining one if they don't have the power to complete dungeons, because like we've mentioned, there are tons of extremely valuable objects inside these raids, from monster crystals to mana crystals, and a person can easily get filthy rich from having a surefire way to farm and sell these materials. So just know when you see a guild leader in this series, they're probably as rich as the Kardashians or even more. There's a secret that only a few characters know, and that's apparently that hunters have a secret smell that they produce from their bodies, but according to the ones who can smell it, this scent really stinks. We pick up on this by paying attention to Haein's story over the course of solo leveling, but a good example is during the training arc between different groups of hunters, where Haein notices that Jin Woo smells different from everyone else, and even him just being around causes the air to feel different. Over in Japan, there's another hunter named Kay, and when he's in this room, even though he has a gas mask on, which is meant to filter the outside air, he says that he can barely breathe because of the amount of S-rank hunters in the room due to just how horrible the scent is. Now, this whole thing of sense and no sense is only going to be really important for Haein and Jinwoo's story together as the story goes on, so you don't have to pay too much attention to it, but just remember, no matter how cool a character looks in this series, they're smelly. As awesome and amazing as Sung Jinwoo's powers are, they also come with a pretty big negative as well. If you were given the same chance as Sung Jinwoo to become excessively powerful in this world, you'd probably go on and become one of the most famous people in history. However, at the beginning of our story, our main character quickly realizes that this would actually be against his greater interest. When he's at home watching the news and thinking about how he should probably get a proper reevaluation, Jinwoo reconsiders when he thinks about how his reawakening will become a massive topic on social media and the news if it's revealed. Because in the solo leveling world, hunters have pretty much taken over the role of celebrities and movie stars at the top of the social class. This comes with benefits, since the more attention a hunter has, the more likely they'll be able to work with a notable guild or get high-paying contracts. But for Jinwoo specifically, if people were to learn that his ability allowed him to continuously get stronger by leveling up more and more, there might be a massive uproar as people try to figure out his ability, and even worse, those who are jealous or might want to plot against him would start to appear, and this is why. The world is filled with mana thanks to the awakening of hunters in the various dungeons and gates opening all around the world on any given day, but as much as a gift as these powers are to some, they can absolutely be a detriment to others. One prime example is the Eternal Slumber Disease, a disease that began appearing after the emergence of gates in Jinwoo's world. Thanks to the abundance of mana leaking out into Earth, or even just the presence of someone with strong enough mana, some people who are intolerant to mana in the same way that someone would be intolerant to the lactose in milk actually faces way worse symptoms than just having irritable bowels. A mana intolerant human typically starts to feel drowsy more often throughout the day when symptoms first appear, and eventually they'll fall into a deep sleep where they'll either be hooked up to machines and kept alive never to wake up again, or their families will let them go. No one has ever woken up from eternal slumber, and what's worse is that the life support machines are special and very expensive, so before he goes broke, Sung Jinwoo needs to save his mother, and who he promised to take care of his sister while she's gone. While Sung Jinwoo was testing out his powers and starting to figure out how they work in Korea, out in America on the US East Coast, an interesting development is taking place. In the series, we've already met Jinwoo's mom, who was stuck in an eternal slumber that she's never expected to wake from. However, it's a different story with Jinwoo's dad, who disappeared within a dungeon many years ago, leaving the family behind and causing the mom to never want to move from their house into a nicer one in the hopes that he'll one day return, since no one has actually gone completely missing in a dungeon before. That brings us back to America, where inside of an A-rank dungeon, an entire crew of hunters is completely taken out, leaving only one awake and in complete shock, as he says that they were all taken down by a human-shaped monster with mana stronger than the entire A-rank dungeon. This man-shaped monster tries to speak to the hunter, but he can't understand a word and continues to panic. However, thankfully, we don't have to learn Korean to learn what he said, as we find out that not only is this somehow the father of Sung Jinwoo, now returned after all this time, but he actually appeared within this dungeon somehow completely empty of any monsters or bosses, and since this is the first time this has ever happened, he's gonna have a lot to go through before he even has a chance at meeting his son again. We've been introduced to the character of Hwang Dong-suk, who's the leader of the traitorous lizard squad that betrays Sung Jinwoo in his first C-rank dungeon, but overseas there's actually a much more important character waking up with a headache the morning after Jin enters his dungeon, and that would be the brother of Hwang Dong-suk, Hwang Dong-soo. This S-rank hunter is extremely powerful, and he's actually a big shot over in America after leaving Korea and leaving his brother behind, who we said was too weak to ever make a name for himself. This relationship is what caused Hwang Dong-suk to be such an a-hole and start betraying people in dungeons so he could amass tons of wealth and impress his bro. However, when this gets him killed by Jinwoo, Hwang Dong-soo is really quick at figuring out that someone must have taken out his brother, and all the way from America he puts all the pieces together to determine that this was Sung Jinwoo's doing, since only him and Yoo Jin survived the spider dungeon. Expect him to make his way to Korea to try to confront our main character, but before these two ever meet, this guy is going to have a serious effect on Jin's life, as he has a chance meeting of Sung Il-hwan, the father of Jinwoo. We've seen that Sung Jinwoo has an inventory that he can fill up with various things like weapons, but on that subject, how exactly does our MC choose which weapon he uses, and are there other options? Well, during Jinwoo's job change quest, we see him realize that the Rasaka dagger he got from defeating the snake isn't going to be enough to pierce Igris, so he opens his gamer menu up and discovers that there's actually a shop feature inside that lets him buy all sorts of items using money that he's accumulated from killing monsters and clearing dungeons. Now, you'd think that when trying to take down a knight with incredibly strong armor that he would go for something way bigger like a great axe, but instead what he does is he buys a weapon called the Night Killer Dagger, which is worth 2.8 million gold. And this thing is definitely worth the price because it adds a plus 75 attack bonus, but on top of that it has a bonus specifically against armored opponents that gives Jinwoo another 25% additional damage on any attacks he does with it. This B-class item is going to stick with our main character for a long time, but if it isn't obvious at this point, he's a little bit of a Dagger fanboy, so don't expect Jinwoo to start busting out tons of different weapon types because our boy clearly has a favorite. One of the things we're going to start seeing more and more over the course of the series are hunter skills, which are abilities that certain hunters have that are unique to them or their class based on the type of abilities that they have. For Sung Jinwoo, we've already seen a few of the skills he has as part of his gamer system, like his sprint ability, which raises his speed by 30%. However, there are some other really awesome and useful skills in the series, like Kang Taeshik's stealth skill, which completely lets him erase his presence in every way. Jinwoo himself gets some pretty amazing skills as the story goes on, like his Dominator's touch ability, which pretty much acts as an invisible mage hand that he can use to use telekinesis on various objects or even grab lesser opponents and bring them closer to him or manipulate them in various ways. Skills aren't something you'll see on extremely weak hunters, and even when you do see a skill on a D or C rank hunter, definitely keep in mind that somewhere out there is an A or S rank hunter that has a way better version of that skill. If you want to learn every skill Jinwoo gets over the course of the series, for Sung Jinwoo, we've already seen a few of the skills he has as part of his gamer system, like his sprint ability, which raises his speed by 30%. However, there are some other really awesome and useful skills in the series, like Kang Taeshik's stealth skill, which completely lets him erase his presence in every way. Jinwoo himself gets some pretty amazing skills as the story goes on, like his Dominator's touch ability, which pretty much acts as an invisible mage hand that he can use to use telekinesis on various objects or even grab lesser opponents and bring them closer to him or manipulate them in various ways. Skills aren't something you'll see on extremely weak hunters, and even when you do see a skill on a D or C rank hunter, definitely keep in mind that somewhere out there is an A or S rank hunter that has a way better version of that skill. If you want to learn every skill Jinwoo gets over the course of the series, let me know by getting this video to 1,000 likes and we'll discuss them all in a short. When the series started, we saw Sung Jinwoo get a few different abilities from the gamer system. However, one of his skills was mysteriously left unexplained, so let's go into what exactly it does. First off, if you remember, Jinwoo was given a secret quest called Courage of the Weak in his first dungeon, but when he passed it, he was given the hidden ability, Great Spellcaster Kendiaru's Blessing. This is a blessing passed down onto Jinwoo that is meant to ensure that he'll always remain healthy and strong throughout his life. This reward is also what healed up the limbs that he lost at that time, but aside from that temporary effect, it has the permanent effect on Jinwoo's body that makes him immune to all diseases, poisons, and negative status effects. On top of this, any damage that Jinwoo takes will be healed at an explosive rate if he falls asleep, since it sends his regeneration ability into overdrive. With this, in most situations, Jinwoo should be able to make it out without any bad scars or anything weakening him in the next battle, but I suppose like Deadpool or Logan, one of the worst things about this is Jinwoo can't get drunk and have a good time with friends. After defeating Hell's Gatekeeper Cerberus, Jinwoo was given enough EXP to level up at least 4 times, but the best part is the rewards he gets from this first area boss as far as items. First off, Jinwoo realizes that he barely survived that fight, so when he looks towards the first floor boss gate, he realizes that he'll definitely die if he keeps moving forward, so he's going to take his new items and leave, only to return a little later in the story when he's a bit more capable. Thankfully for his efforts, Jinwoo was given the Warden's Necklace item, which is an A-rank Cerberus collar that he got from the monster, which raises his ability and sense up by 20 points. Beyond this, he also gets the key to the next area of the castle that he can use whenever he comes back, and he also got a mystery class material called the Cerberus Fang that Jinwoo can likely use to create a new dagger or other items in the future if he chooses to. Now, it's a good thing that our main character hopped into this dungeon when he did, because sure, it was really difficult, but it was a really quick way to gain a few levels that he's going to need as he heads into his next dungeon, where we'll be explaining how Jinwoo was going to come across a really dangerous battle that puts his friends from episode 1 in danger all over again.